This is Monica Perez. Welcome back to Story Time. I am doing it a little bit differently now. For this book anyway. The book is Rhythm, Riots, and Revolution by David Nobel. And it's so full of like propaganda and counter propaganda and stereotypes and kind of outdated thinking. And all of that kind of buries some real stuff about actual like communist infiltration. And I don't even know what that means. Like this has gotten me down into a rabbit hole of like, what was the Soviet Union? What was communism? What was the Cold War? Obviously, it was a dialectic. We have that picture of Karl Marx and the capitalists paying him off. We have Major Jordan's diaries about the West giving or selling, I think arms. I think it was arms to the Soviets. I'll have to brush up my memory on it. I have it here. And the it's more like my opinion of what the communist thing was. It was more like after the Industrial Revolution, people were whatever, after serfdom, slavery, or whatever, people were disgruntled or unhappy or felt empowered or were getting too rich. Like that's what Bismarck said to the Kaiser. People are getting too rich. We need to tax them and give the money back when they're old and they need it. And then they'll be nice to us because we have their money and they want it. That's not how he said it, but that's the thing. So I just think this was a way to keep all the power and the money at the top, communism, and make the people think that they were in control. So socialism, communism really was just an industrialist ploy. And there's so many industrialist ploys, I think, and not like regular good industrialists, people who want, as Knock would say, to use the political means over the economic means of gaining wealth. So to prevent competition, to not pay fair wages, to do all the things that they do to keep the money and the power at the top. And that communism is like a subterfuge. And it's international. Like that, the Soviet stuff was international as opposed to the German socialism, which was national. And that's part of it. So the fact that it was international may lend credence to the suggestion that the communists were actually infiltrating the United States culturally and politically. And so whatever you think about those psyops, because my father was a big like Red Scare guy, but I think the Cold War was probably, if not definitely, fomented by the defense industry, who didn't want defense spending to end after World War II. That's why I don't think Robert Oppenheimer was a communist spy. I think he worked for the defense company and he had to give some weaponry to the other side so it would justify an arms race. You can't justify an arms race if you've already won it. So that's my position on it. However, that doesn't mean that there wasn't real activity like this. So I looked up the Venona papers. Do you remember the Venona papers? My father felt very vindicated when the Venona papers came out because I thought I just had it here. Because when the wall fell, the libraries were open or the archives were open behind the Iron Curtain briefly, and then they closed again. But I think Western scholars came in and were able to look at the papers from the Soviets and found that the stuff from the House Un-American Activities Committee, the Red Scare, a lot of that stuff was true. So I wonder where I have this. I think I'm just using the angels, as Scott says. I'm just going to AI on this one. Mainly because if I were going to go to like a schizo source, like I might prefer, you can't really trust it because it's going to say, it might overemphasize the meaning of the Venona papers. But if AI, which is mainstream curated thing, tells us that it's what it is, then we can, even if you take it with a grain of salt, you are going to if it says it's going to be communist, it's communist. So the Venona papers are a collection of approximately 3,000 decrypted Soviet intelligence cables from the 1940s that revealed extensive Soviet espionage within the United States government. Declassified by the NSA beginning in 1995. Of course, you don't know why these people do these things, but they were declassified in 1995. These documents provided concrete evidence that settled decades of debate regarding the guilt of high-profile Cold War figures. Key revelations and figures. The Venona intercepts identified 349 individuals in the U.S. who had a covert relationship with Soviet intelligence agencies. The Rosenbergs, Julius Rosenberg, codenamed Antenna and Liberal, was unmistakably identified as the head of a spy ring that passed atomic secrets to the Soviets. So this is where I think, yeah, well, they did that because Rand asked them to, or they were duped or whatever. Anyway, Alger Hiss, a high-ranking State Department official codenamed Ailes, whose long-disputed guilt as a Soviet agent was largely confirmed by these cables. Klaus Fuchs, a British scientist at the Los Alamos Laboratory, codenamed Charles and Rest, who provided critical data on the Manhattan Project. Harry Dexter White. Wow, that doesn't talk about Oppenheimer. Harry Dexter White, the second highest official in the U.S. Treasury, codenamed Jurist, who was revealed to be passing sensitive financial and strategic information to the Soviets. Donald McLean and Guy Burgess, senior British diplomats, McLean, codenamed Homer, whose exposure through Venona led to their flight to the Soviet Union. This is all in the New York Times, according to the Angels. Origins and technical breakthrough. The Venona project was a secret U.S. Army signal intelligence service program. Oh, I thought it came from the archives of the Soviets. It came from our own archives? Well, it just proves that they knew exactly what was going on and they really didn't stop it. They could have brought this stuff forward in the House Un-American Activities Committee hearings, and McCarthyism would not be a dirty word. It'd be a very clean word. Anyway, the U.S. Signal Intelligence Service program, precursor to the NSA, that began in February 1943. The Soviets had an error in their cryptography, which allowed it to be broken. And the project began in 43. It did not super breakthrough until 46. It continued in secret until 1980, long after the Soviets had been tipped off about it by moles like Bill Weisband and Kim Philby. Wow. The release of these papers fundamentally shifted the historical understanding of the early Cold War. Confirmed espionage proved that Soviet infiltration was far more widespread than many historians had previously believed. The CPUSA, they confirmed that the CPUSA, Communist Party of the United States, was actively and willingly involved in Soviet espionage and recruitment. The importance of CPUSA is it funded a lot of what we would call subversive movements, and it wasn't a grassroots American thing. It was actually funded by the Soviets, which is, you can have your own political viewpoints, and you can even be politically active, but you cannot, I guess it's illegal or whatever to falsely present yourself and fund whatever as an agent of a foreign country. I don't know. What if you're an agent of an international elite? I don't know. But this, see, now I'm rereading this with my own brain thinking, anyway, so I'll tell you in a second. Legacy of secrecy. Because the project was so highly classified, the information could not be used as evidence in open court, leading the government to rely on other investigative leads for prosecutions. So that's why McCarthy was thrown under the bus, because they just felt like it was all hearsay, I guess. But for me, now that I'm reading this, this is justifying the Cold War, which is probably being kind of second guessed by a lot of people, like such as me. So just round and round we go. But the point is that when these guys in this book say communist infiltration into this part 2 of this book is about children's records, it is true. They're whatever you think about the communists, whatever you think about who is funding it, that is the conduit, that is the name of the thing that was doing this to American kids and Canadian. So part 2 is called The Communist Use of Rhythmic Hypnotic Music. And the little intro quotes are, the methods devised by the free world to combat illness are used by the communists to create it. Dr. Leon Freedom. from the book Brainwashing. Another quote, Alexander Kabalevsky, an Austrian physicist, escaped from the Kharkov Institute of Physics, Kharkov, Russia, and told them that the communists had research projects going on with hypnotic techniques and brainwashing. Okay, so I think we talked about this last time. Poor innocent David Nobel doesn't realize that the United States was doing much worse than what's described in this book. I mean, I don't know who was worse, and they always said, well, we have to do it because the Soviets are doing it. But anyway, we were doing it. All right, so chapter 1, nature of red record companies. So I'm not reading this whole thing. I reread it in advance and just highlighted the paragraphs that I want to read. So I cut a lot of stuff out. Hopefully we can knock out a whole part, a whole segment rather than a chapter. But I'm going to read some of it. Boris Moros, counter spy for the United States, testified under oath that some of the fronts for communist machinations and operations in the United States have been certain record companies. One of these record companies, established by the communists in the United States, employing the techniques of the Russian scientists and disking records geared to nerve jam our children, was and still is known as Young People's Records. It was established in 1946, and its president for many years, Horace Grinnell, one-time instructor at the subversive Jefferson School of Social Science, when called before the House Committee on Un-American Activities, submitted 4 solid pages of First and Fifth Amendments. I guess Fifth Amendment, like I'm not answering. In an official HUAC, whatever, Un-American Activities Committee report, 100 Things You Should Know About Communism and Education, the American people were alerted to a number of subversive organizations. The report stated, here are a few organizations which have been declared subversive by the Attorney General, the Committee on Un-American Activities, or some other official investigating agency. Listed as one of the cited subversive organizations was Young People's Records. In the government's guide to subversive organizations and publications, Young People's Records was again cited as subversive. Dr. Bella Dodd, one-time member of the Communist Party, testified to the effect that the communists were extremely interested in financially supporting YPR. For some time, YPR, Young People's Records, was, according to the press, a subsidiary of the Traffic Publishing Company, which I think is kind of funny, since trafficking has other meanings. The manager of the company was identified as Herman Singerman, who not only engaged in communist political subversion, but was also engaged in a union which was expelled from the CIO in 1950 for being communist dominated. Interestingly enough, this very union was YPR's representative, the Local 50, and Herman Singerman was the Local 50's representative. Karl Prussian, for many years a member of the Communist Party and a former agent for the FBI within the party, so I guess he was a double agent, stated, I can definitely state under oath that within the cell apparatus of the Communist Party, both of these organizations, Young People's Records and Traffic Publishing Company, were known about, accepted, and supported by the communist cell members. So I wanted to wiki Young People's Records to see if it is even made a blip, if it meant anything at all. And I found it. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. The Smithsonian. I'm seeing this on a Smithsonian website. It's called folkways.si.edu. Up in the corner is a let me just bring it up. I know most people are just listening, but let's just give it a shot. I'm only going to bring it up as evidence that this is an actual Smithsonian recording website. So let me share the screen. Okay. So let's go to the ovary. So I found ovary overview. So I found this YPR on this Smithsonian website, and I looked and looked to see if it mentioned any of this stuff about it being found to be subversive and communist and supported by communists, funded by communists in the House Un-American Activities Committee. And of course, all that stuff got washed away. As soon as you said McCarthyism, people were blacklisted and blackballed. You were a witch hunter. But as the Venona papers point out, and the NSA knew all along, it was true. These things were being funded by communists in Russia. So that's what they were doing. And their purpose was to change the thinking and the mental state of the kids. So we get into a little bit of that in the chapter, but I want to read you just what it says in the Smithsonian about this communist music thing. Founded in 1946, Young People's Records was one of the first record labels dedicated to releasing interactive music for elementary and preschool age students. It goes on to say it was founded by Horace Grinnell, a Juilliard graduate, and Sarah Lawrence graduate. It was owned by Abraham Pomerantz. It featured Pete Seeger. We probably talked about him last time. And it goes on to say that within several years of its founding, the label was acquired by John Stevenson and Milo Sutcliffe, owners of Children's Record Guild. Let's see. Okay, Young People's Records was visionary in its early embrace of vinyl rather than shellac. The artwork was packaged to design and draw children to the records. The music and lyrics, often composed by progressive music educator Judith Sidorsky, employed sing-alongs and dramatic play to transform the listening process into an interactive opportunity for learning. It eschewed fairy tales and fantasy in favor of subjects that children might encounter in their everyday life, as well as folk tales and music education. It was generously gifted to the Smithsonian. Margaret Wise Brown features in that too. I think Goodnight Moon. It's too bad because I really liked that one. Let's see. I think there's a little bit about the history that I wanted to hit. Launched. Oh my gosh, I missed this. There you go. Launched in 1946, the groundbreaking record label Young People's Records was America's first popular mail-order subscription record club and the first label to issue its entire catalog exclusively on vinyl rather than shellac. It was also the only record company ever to be blacklisted for allegedly being a communist front. YPR, and then it just goes on to say, YPR made records for two age groups, preschool and elementary, issued every month with cover art. It was an educational guidance program, ideally suited to a mail order format. I mean, I guess that's it. You're just supposed to laugh at that it was argued to be a communist front. He mentions in here that they never asked for that designation to be revisited. They never objected to it. They were, I guess, fine with it. What else? Oh, Keynote. Who's Keynote? For the Keynote label, Lester Troop, the production manager and recording supervisor. He remastered a set of European recordings of Spanish Civil War songs. My guess is the communist ones, which was issued because the Spanish Civil War was between the fascists and the communists, and the fascists won. So I assume this is about the communist side, which gets glorified. I don't see, I don't see why. I guess people just hated Franco, but I'm not sure the communists would have been any better. I'm sure the communists would not have been any better. Which was issued in the U.S. in 1940 as 6 Songs for Democracy. Yada, yada. During World War II, Trube worked for the Office of War Information, recording everything from Hitler's speeches to the Bretton Woods Conference. So this guy who ran a communist front music thing was working for the government. And the same thing for Pete Seeger's father. Remember, he was working for the federal music project. And he had done that right after he came back from Germany. And that was right after Lenin was in Germany. So, and the NSA knew about all this stuff and didn't tell about it during the House Un-American Activities Committee, I guess because they were using it for spying, but still. I mean, they could have what they call like parallel investigation. They know what they're looking for so they can find it if they need to, which, by the way, is a terrible thing to do in an actual legal case where like you use fruit of the poisonous tree, something you weren't allowed to get. And because you know the answer, you can put all your resources into finding it from another direction. But in this case, they could have done that because these were subversive records and there was no issue of justice. You could just expose it as being financed by the communists. You wouldn't even have to ban them. So it says Grinnell got the idea for Young People's Records from his wife, Judith Sidorsky, a classical pianist whose experience as a music teacher in progressive schools heavily influenced YPR's philosophy. In these schools, teachers had learned what music children actually wanted to hear instead of what adults thought they wanted to hear. Historically, adults thought kids wanted to hear Mother Goose songs and such, performed in the style of what YPR star Tom Glazer caustically described as some highfalutin lady with an upper-class accent singing to these dear little darlings. But progressive teachers had discovered that children want rhythms they can move to and lyrics about things they can relate to, things from their own world, from the world of here and now. I would say that children weren't given fairy tales and Aesop's fables and Mother Goose because that's what they wanted. This is what they were given, that for better or worse, because those were life lessons. It's what they had to learn. That's what you want them to learn. What you don't want them to do is indulge in their basest instincts, to get in touch with their inner craving and be indulged in that. We're pruning the crepe myrtle here. If you have a crepe myrtle is not pruned, it's not a tree. It's really not a tree. It's a bush, but you can make it into something quite fine. The preschool discs were activity records designed chiefly to promote rhythmic activity or dramatic play. Older kids didn't need a Disney-esque world of make-believe. They liked real history and songs about it. They were also more receptive to modern music and dissonance. At the Little Red Schoolhouse, one of the first progressive schools in Manhattan, the Folkways children's magic guru Beatrice Landeck noted, what may seem like, quote, strange sounds to an adult whose ear has long been subjected to a particular style of music, takes its place naturally and normally in a child's oral scheme. Thus, YPR's elementary level records added more of a conceptual dimension with history, folklore, or music education. He gets into that in this book about how different stages of your development, this music can have different impact on you. That's why this chapter is about hypnosis and young children. All right, I think that we've got enough out of the history. Yeah, under new ownership, YPR ceased to exist as a club, but all titles remained in print and were sold in stores, while select YPR titles were issued on the CRG label for sale to CRG members. Most titles of both labels remained in print until the late 70s. And in 2021, they were gifted to the Smithsonian Folkways by the family of John Stevenson. So you heard it here. The company changed hands, but the records were all still available until the 70s. Okay, let's get back to this guy. It says, established as a subsidiary to Young People's Records were two extremely popular record companies, Pram Records, like a baby carriage, and the Children's Record Guild, CRG. The latter records were also scientifically calculated to nerve jam the minds of our children. They were disked. Pram Records was disked for babies 1 and 2 years old, and no doubt were preparatory to the music heard in the rhythmic activity records of CRG and YPR. Also established as a subsidiary of YPR was Living Languages courses, whose records can be found prominently displayed in communist bookstores, particularly Living Russian. It is obvious that the communists have not entered into the children's recording fields for any humanitarian purpose. As the California Senate Fact-Finding Committee put it, the Communist Party does not overlook the indoctrination of children. The communist bookstores recently have been handing out folders advertising Young People's Records. One of them, distributed by the Communist Party Progressive Bookshop on West 7th Street in LA, is titled, Help Your Child Discover the Fascinating World of Music. Here's a footnote that I'd like to read. It is surprising how much of the meaning of a song is absorbed by a child while singing it. The message of some contemporary folk songs carries greater weight in song than in plain language. That's what Schoolhouse Rock was about. I'm just a bill up on Capitol Hill. They said if you put it to music, kids will remember it. See, that's presumably used for good. I don't know. These songs make a deeper and a more lasting impression than 20 lectures on the same subject. Columnist Jack Lotto, writing on the indoctrination of children through songs, quoted a pro-communist magazine. Taken from Facts, Volume 11. The following, while not directed to children, gives abundant evidence of the communist use of music. Red China is singing herself into the communist ideology, Mrs. Inez McLaughlin told the Port Angeles Reading Club on Friday. Mrs. McLaughlin reviewed the book The Power of Song by F. Olin Stockwell. The author was a prisoner of the Red Chinese for over 2 years at a center where the government was training its cadre. He said that after a morning of studying communist doctrines, prisoners spent the afternoon in mass singing. The songs were catchy, easy to remember tunes combined with words in the communist theme and propaganda. In this way, the author said, the government is able to sing itself into the minds and hearts of the trainees and prisoners. This method is being used in the schools, offices, and armies of Red China. Mrs. McLaughlin said that song has power, whether it is patriotic, religious, or folk music. It grips the emotions, and these emotions determine people's actions, often more than logical thought does. Yeah, that's true. According to Stockwell, if we would win over the communists, we must not only outthink them, outlive them, but out-sing them. Okay, the Progressive Bookshop was owned by Frank Spector. So I Googled Frank Spector, and I stumbled upon something called Key Wiki. Have y'all ever seen that? Key Wiki? I'll switch to that. Anyway, it says Frank Spector, longtime Communist Party USA leader in California, who was once ordered deported to the Soviet Union, has died of cancer at 87. Yeah, so that was the guy who did that. All right. So another footnote. This is about Luria. These are the people, Luria and Pavlov. I think we talked about them last time. They were doing psych experiments in Russia. Dr. Horsley Gant translated Luria's work, Nature of Human Conflicts. In the translator's preface, Dr. Gant states, my sojourn of 6 years in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics as the first American following the revolution to do extended research in the laboratories and medical institutes of the new Russia, just emerging from chaos, my intimate and cordial relations there with the scientists and my admiration of their zealous strivings and achievements, together with my natural interest in the problems Luria illuminates, have made the opportunity to cooperate in the presentation of another scientific book from Russia too great a temptation to let pass. Gant is professor emeritus of psychiatry, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. He translated and edited Pavlov's works, Lectures on Conditioned Reflexes. So in all the time I've heard of Pavlov's dog, I always thought about it as a dog. And I realize now that they just used a dog, but it was meant for us. It's conditioned reflexes. And this guy from Johns Hopkins brought that here and was proud of it. All right, second chapter, analysis of red records. One of the records disked by this communist recording company, the Children's Record Guild Co., is entitled The Little Puppet. Oh my gosh, it is to be played to children. I'm going to play it for you. In the home and in the elementary classroom, supposedly to promote music appreciation or creative rhythm activity. It contains, according to Dr. William Bryan Jr., a certain power of suggestion. I think he was the hypnosis specialist. A certain power of suggestion and musical arrangements designed to be frustrating and hypnotic. It also contains such background effects as a ticking clock, a metronome, and properly placed wind sounds, all elements used in the process of hypnotism. I'll read you the footnotes. Platonov, the word as a physiological and therapeutic factor. Thus, some of our subjects repeatedly put into the state of suggested sleep by verbal suggestion accompanied by metronome beats, lapsed into this state while awaiting their turn in the reception room as soon as they heard the metronome beats coming from the laboratory. Thus, the sound of the rhythmic metronome beats, which had therefore been indifferent to these people, became a conditioned stimulus of the first signal system. Wow. So they do the hypnosis thing with the metronome, and then if they play the metronome in any other music, they can get you to be hypnotically affected by that, is what this is saying. He goes on, we very well know that monotonous, lengthy, and rhythmic sounding of a lullaby, the ticking of a clock, the rustle of trees, the rhythmic and protracted stimulation by a weak source of light, or long continued rocking, which stimulates the vestibular apparatus of the internal ear and stroking some part of the body, all invariably aid in the development of sleep inhibition in the stimulated cortical cells. It inhibits sleep, the development of sleep inhibition in the stimulated cortical cells. I don't know. The rustle of trees, protracted stimulation of weak sources of light, a lullaby. I mean, they put you to sleep. So it has to be what he's talking about. Dr. Granville Knight, a prominent physician, stated unambiguously, there is no question in my mind about the hypnotic effects of the so-called sleepy songs found among these records. Hypnotic induction by means of these records could easily place young children in a most receptive mood for suggestions of various sorts. These might include suggestions about world citizenship against patriotism and nationalism, or anything what the teacher felt should be inculcated in the minds of young children. And it was progressives who were pushing this stuff. When one considers the endorsement by the United Nations of both Young People's Records and Children's Record Guild, the conclusion reached by Dr. Knight are not too inconceivable. Dr. Knight graciously arranged a meeting in Santa Monica, California in 1965 between the board of the LA County Medical Association and this writer, David Nobel. At this luncheon, some Young People's Records were played and analyzed. Approximately 15 or 20 seconds into one record, a Los Angeles physician commented, there's no doubt about it, it's hypnotic all right. Using hypnosis constantly in his practice, it took little time for this physician to admit what we had already suspected. Another authority on the subject, I've played these at length and found they are certainly something to give plenty of thought and consideration to. I would certainly agree that they are in the hypnosis category. Okay. In 1955, Dr. Bryan, the leading authority in hypnosis in America, organized the American Institute of Hypnosis to spur interest in training physicians and dentists in the use of this new medical and dental diagnostic and therapeutic tool. Okay. He has written numerous articles on the use of hypnosis for various medical journals and 2 books, Legal Aspects of Hypnosis and Religious Aspects of Hypnosis, which are the first of their kind in the field. I guess there were ethical questions. The following professional analysis of the little puppet is included in a stenographic transcript of his authoritative testimony regarding these records. He says, in the first place, the thing that strikes me immediately is that the tempo is the same as the pulse rate, approximately 82 beats per minute. Hans Sturmeister, I believe I'm correct, in the British Medical Journal of Hypnotism, commented on a research program of this very thing. When sound stimuli are presented at the same rate as the average pulse rate, they tend to make the suggestion given at the same time. They seem to greatly increase the force with which the suggestions are given at that particular time. The more often hypnotization is repeated, the higher the suggestibility of the subject. So I don't know where he says it, but at some point they say that 82 beats, that children and young people have higher heart rates than older people. So like babies have like over 100, and then toddlers are in the 80s and teens are maybe in the 70s. So that's why the beat's going to be faster if this is what they're after. All right, on more about the little puppet. In the little puppet record, the musician sings lower, still lower. Dr. Bryan comments, this is just like down deeper and deeper. It's obvious induction, a deepening technique. Every one of these things, and the exact fact that the person, as soon as he says drop them and boo, and you then get the reaction of the drum following as though the thing is well on its way to completion. This is strictly an induction record. It's the only thing you can say about it, an absolute hypnotic induction. Even a non-expert can grasp the word content of the record, although Dr. Bryan warns that the devices used in these records are so subtle that they very well may pass inspection by a well-meaning committee of physicians untrained in hypnosis, brainwashing, and other such fields. As long as the puppeteer pulls the strings, the puppet does fine. This is actually in the music. Otherwise, the puppet can do nothing by himself. Dr. Bryan puts it, When you loosen up the strings and the puppet falls down, it's obviously placing the idea in the subconscious of the child that unless the string puller is there, he can't do anything by himself without the specific directions of the communist boss or whoever it happens to be. And it really takes the entire control away from the child. And then after he gets through 3 or 4 of these deepening techniques, he says, I can make you jump much higher than that. And then he goes on to prove it. Dr. William Bryan then remarks that according to Dr. Van Solstad, speaking at the Fourth International Psychiatric Congress in Barcelona, one of the tremendous increases in mental illnesses in this country today is by virtue of the fact that there is a tremendous increase in the, quote, accidental hypnosis that is going on. Remembering Dr. Leon Freedom's opening remarks, their objective is to solely make minds sick. This alarming statement, isn't entirely surprising. Other records produced by the Children's Record Guild include sleepy time records for children. The record is supposed to induce natural sleep, but in reality, the child is placed into a state of hypnotic sleep. Dr. Bryan remarks, now when a suggestion is placed in your mind under such circumstances, you accept it. And you accept it with such a force that this can become a compulsion with you. And that's one of the reasons why we see so much compulsive behavior. And this is the cause of a lot of juvenile delinquency. The symptoms can be as varied as life itself, but the underlying cause is the same, mainly the accidental hypnosis that resulted in the acceptance of the subconscious suggestion which the patient is acting out. I mean, I'm just thinking about the music today. Think about the transition of Justin Bieber. So sweet, so cute. His songs had melodies. And just think of what he's putting out today. I mean, people love him. They like him more than they used to. But I just can't get my mind around it. Okay, he goes on to talk about Tom's hiccups. I'm not going to tell you about Tom's hiccups because I'm going to play you the little puppet. But there was a footnote I wanted to read. Lauria in Nature of Human Conflicts states, we undertook to produce synthetically a complete model of a stable neurosis. All the difficulties which we have referred to might be successfully removed by the help of the hypnotic method. In hypnosis, we can count on obtaining a conflict of fair stability and intensity. The hypnotic method opens up for us some very interesting possibilities capable of helping us in the experimental setting to obtain those stable conflicts which are limited in their influence by the artificially provoked model of neurosis. We may easily cause a collision between our suggested activity and the natural setting of the personality. We may investigate the stages in which the personality orients himself to the suggested intrusion as to something extraneous, and this conflict conditions the deep-lying neurodynamic changes. We may further oppose the activity produced in the waking state, in the hypnotic state, by the subsequent instructions given in the waking state, excluding the free manifestation of the former activity. Then we have a collision of activities characterized by compulsion or tension with a subconscious motive. Finally, we can introduce into the psyche of the subject the entire conflicting process by suggesting during hypnosis two equally obligatory and opposed tendencies. For example, having made the subject incapable of expressing something imperative for him. In all these cases, we were able artificially to produce a model of compulsion and to oppose it by some physiological measure, beginning with a natural reaction of the personality and ending with a motor delay called out in a state of hypnosis. It is obvious that for the artificial creation of acute processes of disorganized human behavior and for a study of its laws, the situation of the hypnotic experiment offers many favorable opportunities. Your goal is disorganization. American stuff, secret stuff, was just as bad. And I was thinking of the conflicts that are in our just in very commercial. So I noticed this even when I was young. It's like every other commercial, it's like Baskin Robbins, Weight Watchers. Nowadays it would be Starbucks, which is more sugar than coffee in my opinion. But there was just every other commercial was like Ring Dings and LA, not LA Fitness when I was in, but whatever, Bali. It was always that kind. I just couldn't understand. I was like, what? We're like schizophrenic. And another thing is this constant stream of materialism and consumerism juxtaposed with environmentalism and green. I mean, just think of AI. AI is pushed by the same people who pushed green energy, and they're about to gobble up more energy than humanity would ever gobble up under the current technology in its entire existence, probably. So and people go along with that. Hands off my body, but get the vax. There is so much, and it does seem to make people freaking neurotic. Your only refuge from the cognitive dissonance is to turn your brain off. Just turn it off, play a video game, look at TikTok, doom scroll, whatever. Like, really, I'm not suggesting it. I'm just saying that's it. So let's listen to the song and we can see if you think the Hiccups song is about psychosomatic illnesses. It's like you can give somebody asthma by telling them there's no cure for their hiccups, something like that. Like if you cure the hiccups, you're going to get something else. That's what Tom's Hiccups is. Like he cures the hiccups, but then he's got a tick, or then he starts sneezing and he only stops doing all those things when he gets the hiccups again. So it says like if they have a sickness and it's cured, they're going to mentally give themselves another sickness. So hypochondria is part of it. All right, I'll read the conclusion. Yeah. All right, let's do which one is this?
Say, how would you look if I turned you into a puppet? First I tie the strings for your head, then strings for your hands and legs, then abracadabraca, hippity-poo, sub-gum, you're all wooden. Here's a puppet boy, he's all wood from head to toe, and here's a puppet girl, she's as wooden as the boy. Here's a puppet boy, he's all wood from head to toe, and here's a puppet girl, she's as wooden as the boy. Now I'm going to pull all the strings and make you move. Little puppet, walk with your legs and arms so stiff. Oh, little puppet, walk like a funny wooden doll. Little puppet, walk with your legs and arms so stiff. Oh, little puppet, walk like a funny wooden doll.
Here, let's skip forward and see if we can find the part about what if he takes the strings away.
Touch your toes, toes, toes. All loose and floppy. Down you flop, flop, flop. Up I pull you up again, and down you flop, flop, flop. Like a droopy, floppy doll. Down you flop, flop, flop.
I think we get the message. That is hypnosis for sure. I mean, I don't think there's any two ways about that. But it was so interesting that when they said that the more you are hypnotized, the easier it is to hypnotize you. And that sound of the metronome gives you that hypnosis. And then the suggestion can be in another context while you're conscious. So all they need is to make sure that the music that they're interested in always does the beat. And it's also helpful to have it as the beat of a child. So it's kind of like a rule of thumb. Well, what age? I wonder if that's somewhere in music writing 101. Like the beat should be consistent with the heartbeat of the person who's targeted. Targeted, not even in a bad way. All right, so let's just conclude this chapter. Concluding his analysis of these communist records, Dr. Bryan states that these records are breeding a tremendous race of people who are going to be mentally ill. It's terrible, really horrible. The scope of this thing is fantastic. This is for the age group 2 to 5. This is terrible. I've never seen anything so bad as this. Scares you to death. You can see when Khrushchev says, we're going to bury you. We won't need to go to war. We're going to have you in 7 or 8 years. Well, obviously, when these school pupils grow up, we won't be able to defend America. When you control the minds of the people that push the button on the A bomb, what good is the bomb? Nothing. Well, it's very well known that illness has always been a great incapacitator, accounting for a greater percentage of any army in any war than all the bombs and everything in the history of wars. And it's obvious that they're approaching it from this standpoint. And if that's true, then why not make everybody sick and unable to defend themselves? And the easiest way to cause it insidiously is through mental illness programs. I will say I have observed that people, I noticed when they came out here, and these are all of my friends out here. So I love these people. I don't mean to disparage them or anything, but I feel like people who really got into music growing up in LA, that it like it became the dominant thing in their lives in a way that I did not see in New York. I mean, people were headbangers or rock, we liked rock and roll stuff, but they were going to work trying to get in the union to do like a blue collar job. But here, just basically everybody I know who's my age just gave themselves over to the scene. And I'm sure the music was great, but it just makes me wonder if because the progressive stuff was more prominent here, and if you look back at the Charles Seeger stuff, that federal music program or whatever was aimed at the West. If maybe that there really is more proof in the pudding than you might think in your neighborhood, that this was more of the incubator out here, and it could account for, because where I live, Pasadena was like had the right to life or whatever was here. This was a super conservative place, and just LA really really embraced the progressivism, and I feel like they had, the land of fruits and nuts or whatever. That's super offensive. But anyway, I think that, I don't know. If I'm looking for proof of what this is saying, I would look to LA. All right, but you can also have notes to myself. You can also add autism, ADD, OCD, all that stuff that goes up and up and up. I mean, we know autism has physiological causes as well, but a lot of this stuff is based on, I mean, it would confirm what these guys are saying. Let me read a little more. Okay. In his book, The Impact of Science on Society, Lord Bertrand Russell says the social psychologists of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing an unshakable conviction that snow is black. Various results will soon be arrived at. First, that the influence of home is obstructive. Second, that not much can be done unless indoctrination begins before the age of 10. Third, that verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. In Apparent Expectation, he says, it is to be expected that advances in physiology and psychology will give governments much more control over individuals' mentality than they now have even in totalitarian countries. So psychology will give governments control. And I've noticed that too. Psychology and sociology were hijacked to separate our eyes from our brains, like from observing and understanding. Verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. So in fact, this is no longer Bertrand Russell, this is the author. Verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. So effective, in fact, that such music can be used to control the little puppet, as well as mentally destroy, Tom's hiccups, our youth. Lord Russell fully understands the impact of such records, and when one remembers the statement by Lacron and Bordeaux, one interesting modern development in the induction of hypnosis is the use of the phonograph record. The communist plan to destroy us from within through menticide becomes apparent. I have a Jim Keith book here that I want to read to you someday, and one of the chapters is menticide. Okay, chapter 4. I'm going to try to skim through this. Distribution of communist records in the United States. It's not just the producing of these records that's ingenious, the placing of them in hundreds of thousands of American homes, thousands of schools, all 50 states and Canada is ingenious and frightening, since the American family nor the American teacher would knowingly purchase communist recordings designed to produce mentally sick children. The communists crawled back into the woodwork and allowed well-intentioned people to do their subversive work for them. The Book of the Month Club, San Francisco Chronicle, New York Times, Music Teachers Quarterly, This Week's Magazine, Good Housekeeping. So it goes on to say how these guys all gave him the seal of approval. And I guess after they were called subversive, it's not clear what the timeline is here, but at some point, some of these organizations retracted their seal of approval, including Good Housekeeping. But Young People's Records continued to use the seal long after it had been retracted. The likewise duped was the National Council of Churches in urging the continued use of Children's Record Guild records on the recommendation of Good Housekeeping and Parents Magazine. In answering an inquiry about the use of CRG records in a Sunday school class, the Inquirer was told, quote, "It would seem to this writer that the good names would seem to this writer." Well, that's weird because it should seem to this teacher, but it would seem to this writer that the good names of Good Housekeeping and Parents Magazine would be sufficient guarantee for your church to continue using their records. So that's the thing. If you infiltrate, it's the slow march through the institutions. You infiltrate from the top, and all the people in the organization. So my kids went to two different private schools, not Catholic schools for high school. And when COVID came and they had the same policies, even though the schools had different characteristics, I believe we got the same emails from the schools. And that's when I realized that network, look, it wasn't my idea to send them to these schools. I'm not the sole decision maker in my household. But they were strong enough to withstand the indoctrination. And those super high-end schools do teach the kids how to do stuff. Like, right, they teach them rhetoric. They teach them the classics. My kids read books that I thought were long abandoned. Certainly, I didn't get them in public high school where I went. So fortunately, they were strong enough to withstand it, but it was stressful. Anyway, we were getting these same emails, and then I realized, like, the Organization for Independent Schools or whatever it's called, they're the ones who are calling the shots about policies. So, and they all had the same, how do you tell internet, something credible on the internet? And it was always the authority of the source, which is a fallacy. Like, it's a fallacy to use that as validation. Anyway, so here at this one point, so my dad, what is this? He's talking about catalogs for teacher recommendations. The Department of Music Education for the state of Texas recommended some of these young people's records. And this is like 60 years ago, I guess. My father would never. So even in the Catholic school, they sent home a little catalog to buy books. Do they still do that? It was the Scholastic catalog. And I think it's like a Catholic press and had children's books. My father, he would do stuff like read the book, like he'd have read about the books and whatever, and he'd write on them and make them take them back to the teacher and to the principal and to the priest. And he would go in and talk to them. I wouldn't be allowed to read the books. I mean, I told you I had to sit outside in the hallway on Tuesdays when they read the New York Times Science Times. He wouldn't let me read the Science Times. Isn't that unbelievable? And at the time, I didn't really care. At the time, I didn't get it. And the teachers thought he was absolutely nuts. And now I'm like, based. And he was right about evolution. But the thing he gave me, the Evolution Hoax Exposed, I think it didn't, I'll have to look it up, but it seemed very propaganda-y to me. If he had given me a math book, I would have been like, oh, that definitely didn't happen. So I've been looking for that book for a long time, and someone sent me, I think Snobby Bobby sent me a link to the book that finally addressed the issue, the elephant in the room, that Darwin could not do the math. Or whatever, didn't know about alleles. Okay. So, all right. This is interesting, and then we'll wrap it up. There's a book there. So he gets this letter. He gets this letter from John Keegan, the publisher of Counterattack. I'm going to tell you who they are. But it says, "Oh, I agree with everything you say. You're completely right about everything. But what you don't understand is that young people's records has been taken over by somebody else. It's no longer the Communist Front organization." And Noble writes back to him point by point, Like, of all your complaints, I can tell you these people are still on the board. Most importantly, all the same records are still available, which we just read in the Smithsonian. All the same records are available. But what he says at the end, Noble says, buddy, we're on the same team, because Counterattack was a anti-communist publication. He said, we're on the same team. Why did you publish this letter to me? You made this an open letter before I could even read it or respond to it. Why didn't you just send it to me? And I would have debunked all of your complaints. But now you've added fuel to the fire by being an anti-communist who thinks that I got my facts wrong. It's pretty interesting. So I was like, okay, who are these guys? Who is John Keegan and who's David Noble, for that matter? So let's see if I still have it. There it is. Okay. John Keegan was the president of Counterattack. He, along with the other two founders, were supposedly former FBI agents, which, of course, to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's such a red flag. But probably back then, they, like, J. Edgar Hoover was probably like a red hunter or whatever. They probably thought that was a good thing, like validation. Anyway, Counterattack was a weekly subscription-based newsletter published from 1947 to 1955 with an emphasis on anti-communist content and organizing boycotts or other actions against those who were accused of communist associations or sympathies. My father used to put cards in shoes. This was made in communist China. Please don't buy it. They were called card parties. The mimeographed, and he'd have to do it without the proprietor seeing, because, of course, they were trying to sell the shoes. The mimeographed newsletter was published by Mimeographed. Remember how good those smelled? American Business Consultants, a private independent organization started by 3 former agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, went into decline after a series of lawsuits by people who were named in the publication, which the NSA probably could have defended these guys if they just gave them the Venona papers up front. But if it went out of business in 1955, I wonder why we're talking about this exchange that happened in 1965. So I guess the public letter, the letter was published, but not in Counterattack, because I don't know. It looks like it's still in existence. I don't understand. It's contradicting my Wikipedia here. What do you do about that? I'm buying this because it's in real time. So he writes back and he's like, why would you do that? Why would you discredit me publicly? And he says, your reprint of a personal letter is being used by the enemies of our republic to keep hypnotic records in our public school systems, disked and sung by pro-communists. I feel it is my Christian responsibility to set the record straight for the sake of our children and our nation. This guy probably wrote the entire book because of that. He's got to defend it. So this is how I think it works. You get somebody with a lot of credibility, like Counterattack magazine. I'm anti-communist. I'm going to do all this stuff that isn't going to make a difference, or calls out people who can defend themselves and make me look stupid, or who you already know is a communist. And then when something comes along that's a real threat, I have a lot of credibility to shoot it down. And that's exactly what they did. So I assume that was the intention. But let's say, who was David Nobel? Might as well just look at that real quick. Nobel was a former associate. Oh, yeah. So he seemed okay. But then there was some screwy stuff with his guys. Yeah, check this out. So Nobel was an American religious leader and writer. He's the former director of Summit Ministries in Manitou Springs, Colorado. Since the 60s, he has written widely on the relationship between religion and popular culture and is an outspoken critic of secular humanism, fair enough, which he describes as unscientific and a religion, agreed. Nobel was a former associate evangelist of Billy James Hargiss's Christian Crusade. This has got Christian Crusade all over it. Nobel served as vice president and president of American Christian College, which Hargiss had founded in 1971 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It closed in 1977 3 years after Hargis resigned following allegations of sexual misconduct against him. He was a member of the Council for National Policy beginning in 1984 and a candidate for Congress against Rep. Robert Kastenheimer. Was when it says he, do they mean Nobel or Hargis? I think it's Nobel was a member of the Council for National. Let's see. Oh, what do you think? Oh, whoop, whoop. Let's see about that. Let's see about this one. Can this be reached? No. It's like Stewie, huh? Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, the Council of National Policy, if you've not heard of it, it's described as the CFR, but way more secretive and on the right, like Steve Bannon's crew. But it is definitely responsible for hijacking Christianity in this country, I think, or I should say, I've read some of Bannon's stuff, not his like Jeffrey Epstein, I'm a Christian Zionist interview thing, like all of that. But his like stuff around the CNP that talked about kind of the role of religion, it gets a little kooky sounding, definitely not authentic, because Bannon was some kind of naval attaché. I think he held the same position as Bob Woodward, who was also an inside job. And I mean, just weird stuff. I won't get into the whole Bannon thing right now, but anyway, the CNP is definitely, whatever, a secretive organization that tries to do stuff. And I think somebody said Ron Paul was in that. I don't know. And I don't know exactly what they've been up to, because nobody really examines them the way they examine the CFR. I think because the CFR is much more powerful. I think when Hillary Clinton said upon becoming Secretary of State, I'm so glad you opened an office in DC, because I didn't feel like going to the mothership in New York or wherever. Weird. The mothership is in London. Okay. So he goes through this guy's letter, yada, yada. What else do I have in my... What else I had? Oh, this was something funny. So, I've been talking about Pete Seeger. Pete Seeger and his father before him were very instrumental in seeding the folk music and real communist stuff. In my travels and my research here, I stumbled upon this sentence. Pete Seeger was, and people know this, like this, if you're a Dylan fan or a Seeger fan. Pete Seeger is and his songs were great. Pete Seeger's songs were absolutely fantastic. You'll know most of them, or a lot of them. Pete Seeger was one of the earliest backers of Bob Dylan. He was responsible for urging A&R man John Hammond to produce Dylan's first LP on Columbia, and for inviting him to perform at the Newport Folk Festival, of which Seeger was a board member. Now, what you probably heard was that Seeger went bananas because Dylan, I think, plugged in. I think he brought electric to the folk festival, but it's like Jimi Hendrix burning the guitar. I believe that was pre-planned to make a splash, to make the news, to change things. Kind of like when Miley Cyrus, Hannah Montana, like got naked on a wrecking ball. It's like, we got to put a bullet in her head. Hannah Montana, it's Miley Cyrus now. I mean, that's what they do. It's like Justin Bieber singing, Christmas songs to the Obamas, and then singing his latest in his, where was it, underwear or what, at the Grammys. It's just different. Think of Britney Spears, think of all of them. That's what they do. So anyway, let's see if we got anything else. All right, I'll read you his conclusion. It says in the Senate document, so I'm reading this not because we need to watch out for communist fronts supported by the USSR. I'm reading this because these techniques were, in my opinion, developed in the USSR for use here. And that's what this guy is saying. But I think the way surveillance stuff is incubated in Israel and China, because they don't have the same laws that we have, or for that matter, some weapon stuff on Indian reservations before they had casinos. They were desperate for money, and federal laws did not apply there, or like what's happening in Ukraine. So I think they outsource stuff that cannot be done here, and then import like human experimentation, and then import the tactics because it's hard to draw a line that they're intending to harm people. But I think they are. Anyway, so I'm going to tell you about the tactics. You keep your eye open for these tactics still in use, but change the names from communist USSR, whatever. Okay. A number of important points were set forth concerning communist fronts. To begin with, the document states this is the Communist Party of the United States, 1956. It's a Senate document. It would be well for alert Americans to be aware of the tricks employed by communist fronts when faced with the threat of exposure or prosecution. We list some of these which have previously been employed. The report then follows with a listing of communist tricks and gimmicks to assure their misdetection. 1. After lengthy and arduous investigation, the front will suddenly change its name so that the job will have to be done all over again. Front organizations change their names from time to time and are variously labeled in different cities and neighborhoods. Sometimes fronts will merge to avoid exposure or prosecution. At times, they have been known to assume a name similar to some well-known and respectable organization. That's like Alul says about media. 40 different names, but the same Associated Press feeds them the news. And it sounds like you've got 40 different competing sources. Okay, 2. The names of prominent citizens who have been duped into the organization, who are usually inactive and unaware of what is going on, will be cited as proof of the organization's respectability. 3. Individuals who expose the character of communist fronts will be treated with libel suits, smears, physical assaults, blackmail, and ouster from positions. They will be canceled in the parlance of our times. Legal advice is always valuable as a safeguard. 4. The organization will claim a membership which cannot be accurately verified. 5. Communist fronts, when identified as such, will immediately and vigorously deny the charge. 6. A favorite device is to arrange for the defense of the particular front by a non-communist publication. 7. Oftentimes, after a communist front has been successfully launched by a provisional committee, a new committee will be substituted to conceal the origin of the organization. I feel like the alt media is also now this. A favorite communist gambit is to claim that since an individual belonged to a given front organization prior to its citation as such by the Attorney General, the individual should not be held responsible. This asks us to ignore the fact that a front organization is by definition subversive, and except in the very few cases where organizations originally formed by non-communist forces were taken over by the communists thereafter, all front organizations were subversive from their inception. That has changed. I think they have the exact opposite tack now. Establish it totally legitimately, like Good Housekeeping and Parents Magazine, and then infiltrate it at the top. You have so much more credibility. And once you understand the psychology of a hierarchy like that, or what make sure it's a place where people get paychecks, you're probably going to get most people to go along. The important date is not when the organization, blah, blah, blah. All right. So here we go. This is the conclusion. This is the responsibility to our children. Sorry. See, over an hour. Everybody wants my attention. You want to say hi? I don't want to put you up here. You want to get out. All right. Let me see if I can just distill this conclusion into just one thing. Since these communist records were designed to nerve jam children, create frustration, and induce hypnotism, leading to mental and even physical illness. And since 2.5 to 4.5 million of our children at the present time stand in need of psychiatric help, this was in 1965, it is peculiar to find elementary school catalogs endorsing them. And since these communist record companies have been declared subversive in a number of different investigations by federal and state legislative committees on un-American activities, there appears little excuse for these catalog companies to be ignorant of the facts. Whatever the excuse, the time to clean out these destructive little discs of mental illness is now. Oh, I'm thinking about the horrible books that they put in kids' libraries. So you can't, I don't care if they have the Bible in a public school. I have a Bible at home. But what they do put in those schools obviously is meant to do the same thing these records. Okay. Our children are a sacred trust. Our Lord Jesus Christ said, "But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and that he were drowned in the depths of the sea." If someone even attempted to molest our children physically, we should be the first to repel such perversion. We would stand with the Apostle Paul, if any provide not for his own, and specifically especially for those of his own house. He hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. But we confront no mere attempt. The communists are actually molesting the minds of our children by the most cunning, diabolical conspiracy in the annals of human history. Dr. William Bryan said, it's not only possible, it's happening. Not only possible, it's being done all the time. This started clear back in 1938. Alexander Kabalevsky, an Austrian physicist, escaped from the Kharkov Institute of Physics, Kharkov, Russia, and told them that they had research projects going on with hypnotic techniques and brainwashing. Edward Hunter, in referring to this type of insidious mind attack very carefully but forcefully, says, surely there can no longer be a trace of doubt that brainwashing is sheer evil. The fight against it is the culminating issue of all time in which every human being is a protagonist. There can be neither escape nor neutrality where such responsibilities lie. Christians and all real Americans who love their sons and daughters cannot remain silent. To do so would be unchristian, cowardly, and a sign of utter capitulation to the enemy. Our immediate action, tempered with knowledge, wisdom, and love, is of the utmost urgency. And this was written at the time that the computer thing was emerging. If you read Surveillance Valley, you will see that this stuff all got its start around Vietnam. Watch Das Nets. That's when it all started. But we have this with our kids now. That's why I have my son, who's 23, but he has Down syndrome, has a thing called a pinwheel phone. It's very restrictive. And now I'm trying to find a laptop like that, a really restrictive laptop that they can't get a lot of that stuff. But the music he listens to I don't control his music. I let him listen to it. He likes Justin Bieber. It's just awful. I mean, I'm not saying Justin Bieber isn't, like, people like him, and I'm not trying to slag him, whatever. It's the stuff that they listen to that doesn't have like all the elements of music. It just, maybe I need some that's at the same rate as my heartbeat so it doesn't make me insane. I can't stand it. And then I tell him to put headphones on, and then it just goes underground, and I don't know where it's going to drift off to. Anyway, I hope this is interesting. I'm finding it interesting, and I guess that's all that really matters. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I have so many fun things happening. We're now doing 2 cognitive dissidents a month. I'm also doing news flashes, so it's great. Right now, it's still pretty much exclusively for premium listeners, just because I know they want to hear everything I have to say, or they're happy to have it. I'm not going to flood their zone, as it were. They're happy to have it. So I'll probably refine it and put some in the free feed. But all I really want is, if you like this show, to please go to the podcasting platform you're listening on and give me a nice rating. You don't even have to write a review. Just click some stars. Thank you so much. This is Monica Perez.